How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. I promise I will move on from war coverage when I can, but there's so much happening, and we've got the intelligence community having their public meetings for Congress. I'm collecting audio on that. Probably be able to summarize and get to that stuff in the third hour. There is other stuff I want to talk about, including the Cesar Chavez story. You should know up front, though, I mentioned the New York Times ran a story that claimed the Trump administration is supportive of allowing the communist regime in Cuba to stay in place so long as the president of Cuba goes away. Marco Rubio this morning tweeted out that story and said, it is not true. It is a lie. The sources cannot be trusted. And that is not the vision we have for Cuba. The President of the United States tweeted out, "How about statehood?" Now, he didn't say that was for Cuba, but we all kind of know. I will say some of the Joe Kent defenders out there are calling me a neocon. I want it on the record. I am not a neocon. I am an American imperialist. I believe an American empire would be good for the world. An American-led world order would bring peace and stability. We've had 2 Pax Americanas in the world. We should have another one. We had one after World War II before the Soviets got nukes. We had one after the fall of the Soviet Union. Everything was hunky-dory in the world, and we should have an American-led world order. And if the Cubans want to become a client state of the United States, or better yet, a territory of the United States, listen. Cuban cigars and Cuban sandwiches are some of the greatest things in life. Cuban rum is excellent. Cuba itself is dilapidated, decrepit, out of gas, and full of commies. You send the American diaspora of Cubans back to Cuba to rebuild Cuba after the end of communism there, and think about just the American economy. Let's just think about this for a second, please. Do you know how many Iranians work in Silicon Valley and on Wall Street and banks? Do you know how many do? It's a lot. In Toronto and Montreal, in the financial sector, there are a lot of Iranian refugees who work in the banking sector. Almost every single friend of mine growing up, I was telling this to the Shah the other day, almost every friend of mine from Iran growing up, their families worked in banking. They all loved the Shah and his family. And I just think that if you were able to topple the Iranian regime, the Iranian people would be so grateful to the United States, and the Iranian diaspora would flow into the country. The amount of economic output that would be directed towards the United States would be an extremely great thing. The amount of money the United States would make through toppling the Iranian regime just through the technology, investment, banking, finance, and oil industry that would all get American contracts would be extreme boost to the American economy, not just the Iranian economy. And same with Cuba. You get the families of the original tobacco farms to go take their land back in Cuba. Let the Fuentes family go down to Cuba and rebuild the cigar population with the Padron family. My gosh almighty. Can you imagine if the Padrones and the Fuenteses went down to Cuba and were able to rehabilitate the Cuban economy through cigars? Holy cow. And then you get, the Cuban entertainment industry and the Cuban finance industry, and they go back to Cuba. We could be looking at trillions of dollars of economic growth to the American economy as a byproduct of the Cuban and the Iranian regimes collapsing and being more American. Bring in Cuba as a territory of the United States. Goodness gracious. You know, the star on the Cuban flag was designed in the early 1900s, I think 1905, by a guy in New York, and it was designed to signal the Cubans wanted to be an American state. That's how friendly Cuba was with the United States, and we should have done it. We don't need them to be a state necessarily. Have them like Puerto Rico, although hopefully better and less corrupt than the Puerto Rican government is right now. But even just a friendly nation next door, 90 miles off our coast. The Cuban sugar cane, the Cuban tobacco, the Cuban rum, the Cuban people. Have you ever met Cuban? Cubans are some of the greatest people, the nicest, warmest. Why is it that people who come from terrible regimes are always some of the nicest people? The Iranian refugees, the Cubans, even the Israelis who they have to flee because of the attacks on Israel. Their families aren't safe there. And they're just great people. They're all phenomenal people. And they love this country. These people love this country more than a lot of the writers in the American media do. These people love this country more than most academics on college campuses do. I would rather this country be filled with immigrants from Cuba and Iran than from Harvard and Yale. We would be a much happier, greater, more prosperous free market economy if we replaced all the people at Harvard and Yale and the Ivy League with people from Cuba and Tehran, and even Venezuela for that matter. Now, I got to shift because there's a mythology that is being developed, and it is a false narrative. This is from The Bulwark, the far-left website these days that have just lost their minds. Quote, so our government prepared for the possible Iranian mining of the Strait of Hormuz by decommissioning our Minesweeper ship stationed in the Middle East after bombing Iran last year, and hassling our European allies who still have minesweepers. Just so you understand, this is nonsense on stilts. If I have a friend, I'm doing an event for my friend tonight. In fact, if you will keep my friend Justin in your prayers. The United States Navy has a task force 56 in Bahrain. It's in charge of sweeping the Strait of Hormuz for mines. The team is led by explosive ordnance disposal sailors who operate advanced autonomous underwater vehicles that use side-scan sonar, greatly reducing the amount of time required to locate mine-like objects on the seafloor. The reason we don't have minesweepers anymore, the reason we decommission them is because we have new technology. It's not tested in battle, but it's been tested in the field, and it works quite well. So my friend Justin, I'm doing an event for him tonight. Private event. Won't tell you where it is. Justin has a business that helps businesses. For reasons, he decided a few years ago, you know what, I want to serve my country. He's married, has kids, decided he wanted to serve his country. So he joined the Navy. I guess he's a non-commissioned officer in the Navy. And he has been assigned to Task Force 56. And Justin will be closing his business and leaving his family and going to Bahrain. And so I will go to a dinner tonight in appreciation for him and to thank his clients for their support of him as he closes up shop to go off to war. We have a brilliant number of Americans in this country who are willing to do things like that, and even more brilliant wives and children who are willing to support their husbands doing things like this. Uniquely good people in this country, and we often forget it. But he'll be part of Task Force 56, which will use autonomous underwater vehicles, essentially underwater drones, that with sonar can detect mines and destroy the mines without having to use minesweepers. That's why we got rid of the minesweepers. It is a growing mythology on the left that Donald Trump didn't plan for the shutting down of the Strait of Hormuz. John Bolton came out today and attacked Donald Trump. Now, of course, John Bolton has access to crime with Donald Trump. He says, I briefed him his first term and he didn't plan for it. There's this idea that we didn't plan for it. Yes, we planned for it. We knew it could happen. We also knew what? We had to soften conditions on the ground so that our aircraft could fly unimpeded. It doesn't do an A-10, a hill of beans, to be able to fly over Iran if it's going to get shot down by a missile that flies faster than the A-10. So we had to destroy the positions and the missile batteries and the capability of Iran to shoot down the vehicles that could be used to destroy their access to control the Strait of Hormuz. We have Marines on the way. I suspect they're going to take up residence on Karg Island. Wouldn't surprise me. Would not surprise me at all to see us engage in some way, once the Marines are there, to really wipe out Iranian capabilities on the Iranian coast. But this mythology that has cropped up on the left and in the media that we got rid of our minesweepers because the president didn't plan on this. We got rid of the minesweepers, and what an idiot. We got rid of the minesweepers and we need them. I saw a picture yesterday of our minesweepers. They were on the backs of other boats coming home. If minesweepers are on the backs of other boats coming home and they're not actually sailing themselves home, they had problems. They're 30 years old. My brother-in-law was retired as a Master Chief of the Navy, worked on minesweepers back in the day. Ran engine rooms for minesweepers, among other things, and then grew up to do placement of engine rooms around the Navy. Now he works as an independent outside contractor with the Defense Department, has been a Master Chief. He worked on minesweepers when he was a kid, joined the Navy, enlisted out of high school, and was on minesweepers. I've been on minesweepers before. They're cool ships, but they're old. We have new technology. The idea that we can't replace the old technology with the new is nonsense. The idea that we didn't have something coming to replace the minesweepers is nonsense. The idea that the president didn't anticipate Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz is nonsense. The president of the United States, going back to the 1980s, talked about Iran's willingness to close the Strait of Hormuz. But also, the closing of the Strait of Hormuz hurts the rest of the world more than us. Sure, Brent oil is up. We get mostly West Texas crude in this country because it's produced domestically. We produce all of our needs in this country. One of the reasons that gas prices are going up here higher than they otherwise would is because of places like California shutting down oil refineries. California, at the time we went to war with Iran, began shutting down oil refineries in California. The oil refiners were quitting California because of the economic cost of doing business in California. California itself is driving up California gas prices more than this situation in the Middle East is. The rest of the world, it's impacted. 8% of the oil that flows out of the Strait of Hormuz goes to the Western Hemisphere. The rest of it goes to the Eastern Hemisphere. It's China that's impacted. It's our allies in Asia that are impacted. It's Europe that's impacted. It's not us. It's not us. That's why the NATO nations should probably work to help us in the Strait of Hormuz. They don't want to. That's fine. Many of them can't commission a navy. You know, the British made a big stink about how we're not going to get involved. We don't want to be involved. Well, they can't be involved because they only have 6 operational ships in the entire British Navy. Did you know that? 6. That's the state of the British Navy. It used to be that the sun never set on the British Empire, and now the sun never rises on the British Empire. We understand Iran's capabilities. We are destroying those capabilities. It takes time. But we also knew we needed to go in when we did to disrupt that regime. We couldn't wait. And shutting the Strait of Hormuz was a risk that we took. Ships are flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. As I speak to you right now, there are ships flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is running a disinformation campaign trying to convince people it's not so to try to drive up oil prices. Iran knows the only real weapons it has are 2. The propaganda hatred of the American press towards this operation, towards the Israelis and the president, and economic pain. And we are navigating our way through both quite successfully right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know I try never to lie to you ever, and I try to correct myself when I get things wrong. And I was not lying to you when I told you I believe Jasmine Crockett would be a stronger contender in Texas than James Talarico. I wasn't lying to you. I have known the extent of his background, but I didn't even know this one. This is James Talarico talking to a group of people in Texas in the year of our Lord 2022, 2 years after COVID, and James Talarico is wearing a mask to speak in public in Texas, and listen to what masked up Talarico has to say.
We have, I think, heard more and more issues of animal welfare. I think not just because it's the right thing to do and the moral thing to do, but also it's, as all of you know, necessary to fight climate change. It is now existential that we try to reduce our meat consumption and that we try to respect animals in all aspects of society. And so I am proud to say that our campaign has officially become a non-meat campaign. So we are only buying vegan products from our local vegan businesses. Some of you may know Big Nona's. They were little Nona's, and then they opened up brick and mortar, so now they're Big Nona's. But we just got our pizza from there today. And so the point is that I think all of us, not just policymakers, but everyone has to take personal responsibility in this effort.
This man-child is running for senator from Texas on an anti-meat campaign. He's running on an anti-oil campaign in Texas. He's running on a God is non-binary campaign in Texas. Democrats, you walked right into the trap with this guy. You walked right into it. I think Republicans should vote for John Cornyn in the runoff. It'll be a far cheaper campaign to run than Ken Paxton, but even Ken Paxton can beat this guy. This guy is what a disaster. Now, I got to tell you about Renai. Renai, by the way, he would be opposed to them as well because they use natural gas or propane to heat your water. He doesn't want you to have hot water because, well, hot water uses energy, and energy is bad because it might actually hurt the environment or some such. But with Renai, you get efficiency. You don't have to keep your water tank heated all the time. Just heat your water as it flows into the house, and it works. The tankless water heaters. Go to talkingtankless.com. I have one in my house. I swear by this thing. I was a customer long before I was an advertiser. I begged them to let me advertise for them. We don't have fights in our house over hot water between my kids. That is how awesome the Renai tankless water heater is. Every single one of you with kids understands this. With a tankless water heater, you never run out of hot water. TalkingTankless.com. Yank your tank, put in a tankless water heater, talk to Renai, go to TalkingTankless.com. TalkingTankless.com. Let Renai put in a tankless water heater. They're brilliant. Hello there and welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to shut down what may otherwise be some conspiratorial thinking, and I don't know that it should be conspiratorial thinking, but I have received multiple messages from members of my listening audience that as I was explaining what was on the front page of the Athens Banner Herald, my affiliate WGAU did an emergency broadcast test. And they're like, was this did they shut you? I assure you WGAU did not intentionally take me off the air for discussing the cover of the Athens Banner Herald. But for those of you in Athens, Georgia, who did not hear me at the time because of an emergency broadcast test that they're required to do, let me just say that on the front page of the Athens Banner Herald today, they have a picture of a mother mourning the loss of her son. She is dressed in black, holding a picture of her son, who is in military uniform. And the headline is, "Families Mourn as Dead Are Laid to Rest in Tehran." Now, her son works for the regime that just attempted to slaughter 135,000 people, and the Athens Banner Herald felt it appropriate to put the picture of a mother on the cover, mourning the loss of her son, who was undoubtedly one of the soldiers who helped to murder some of those 135,000 people, 35,000 of which the regime confirmed were killed, 100,000 shot, nurses who helped those shot people, raped brutally. And we haven't seen on the cover of the Athens Banner-Herald the pictures of the families who lost people opposing the regime, but we will see a mother whose son works for the regime, who lost his life in undoubtedly an Israeli or American attack, and families mourn as dead or laid to rest in Tehran. There you have it. That's what I was talking about. The Athens Banner-Herald, part of the USA Today network, using their front page dominated by a picture of a mourner of a soldier who worked for the Iranian monsters. There are actually two stories on the front page above the fold. The one is the big one, families mourn as dead or laid to rest in Tehran. And the other one is Humanities Festival. UGA event features Pulitzer winner. The University of Georgia Humanities Council is hosting the annual Humanities Festival that includes lectures from a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and a photographer who explored the Okefenokee Swamp. The fourth annual festival runs through April 2nd with an event on Tuesday at the Founders Memorial Garden. The public is invited to the gathering with the public program beginning at 5:30 p.m. with remarks from UGA student O. Jeremiah Agbakan and Finn Wash regarding achievements made during the past year in their areas of study. There's going to be a humanities trivia night. Oh, boy. But also, families are mourning the loss of the dead in Tehran. That's the big story. Goodness gracious. Okay, so no conspiracy there. Those tests have to happen. But for those of you listening on WGAU, that's what I was talking about when the government mandated an emergency test. Now, I must move on to a story I'm not surprised was coming. It's rather a really big deal. Cesar Chavez. The left loves Cesar Chavez. For those of you who do not know, Cesar Chavez, he wasn't just a civil rights leader in the United States. He was a union organizer. And so the left in the United States has long worshiped Cesar Chavez. He was a saint to them. Cesar Chavez has roads named after him in the United States. In fact, in many western parts of the nation, roads named after Cesar Chavez serve the same purpose as roads named after Martin Luther King Jr. on the east side of the Mississippi River, which is areas of neighborhoods that you tend to not want to visit. Cesar Chavez has that role in the West, particularly out in the Los Angeles area. If you see a road named after Cesar Chavez, you tend to wish to avoid that area lest you get carjacked, mugged, or otherwise be a victim of crime. Cesar Chavez was an American labor leader, I'm reading from Wikipedia, along with Dolores Huerta and Gilbert Padilla. He co-founded the National Farm Workers Association, which later merged with the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee to become the United Farm Workers Labor Union. Ideologically, his worldview combined left-wing politics with Catholic social teaching. He was born in Yuma, Arizona, to a Mexican-American family. He spent 2 years in the U.S. Navy, and then he became a community organizer. He emphasized nonviolent tactics, including pickets and boycotts, to pressure farm owners into granting striker rights. He imbued his campaigns with Roman Catholic symbolism, including public processions, masses, and fasts. He received much support from labor and leftist groups and was monitored by the FBI. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Bill Clinton. He was considered a saint, a folk saint. Well, the left is beginning to turn on Cesar Chavez. He died in the early 90s. He was 66. His body was flown to Bakersfield, California on a chartered plane. He died of natural causes. They gave him essentially a state funeral. It was a rather big deal. He was celebrated. There are roads named after him. There are numbers of places named after Cesar Chavez. At the start of the presidency of Joe Biden moved a bust of Cesar Chavez on a table directly behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. There's a portrait of him in the National Portrait Gallery. The Postal Service put him on a stamp. They nominated him 3 times to the Nobel Peace Prize. Let me just give you this from Wikipedia. There is an unincorporated area of Hidalgo County in Texas called Cesar Chavez. In Arizona, there's Cesar Chavez Square and Cesar Chavez Park. There's the 25th and Commercial Station in California, named for him. Plaza de Cesar Chavez in San Jose, Cesar Chavez Plaza in Sacramento, Cesar Chavez Waterfront Park in San Diego, Cesar Chavez Park in Delano, Cesar Chavez Park in Oakland, Cesar Chavez Park in Berkeley, Cesar Chavez Park in Modesto, Cesar Chavez Park in Colton, Cesar Chavez Community Center in Riverside, Cesar Chavez Park in Long Beach, Cesar Chavez National Monument in Keene, Cesar Chavez Library in San Jose, and a middle school in Union City, and a high school in Stockton, and a park in Denver, and a park in Vegas, and a park in Seattle. You got Cesar Chavez Boulevard, Street and Avenue in parts of Arizona. In California, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 named after him, 1 in Idaho, 1 in Mexico. You got 4 of them in Michigan, 2 of them in Minnesota, 1 of them in Missouri, 1 of them in Oregon, a bunch of them in Texas, some in Utah, some in Wisconsin. You've got libraries named after him in Arizona, California, and Michigan. You've got schools all over California named after him in Arizona and Colorado and Illinois and Maryland, Minnesota, Michigan, New Mexico, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, Washington, D.C., Wisconsin. You've got college buildings named after him in Arizona, California, Colorado, Michigan, and New York. You've even got in Oregon the College of Cesar Chavez. He worked along with Dolores Huerta. Dolores Huerta is 95, is an American labor leader and a feminist activist. She worked the far left. She's campaigned for abortion rights. She was an honorary chair of the 2017 Women's March to oppose Donald Trump. She supported Robert F. Kennedy, George McGovern, Al Gore, Howard Dean, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. She's a supporter of LGBTQ rights and immigration reform. And today she's confirmed a New York Times report that Cesar Chavez raped her. And she kept her mouth shut for the good of the cause. The headline in the New York Times today, Cesar Chavez, a civil rights icon, is accused of abusing girls for years. An investigation by the New York Times found extensive evidence that the United Farm Workers co-founder groomed and sexually abused girls who worked in the movement. Anna Maguera remembered the day the man she regarded as a hero called her house and summoned her to see him. She walked along a dirty trail, entered the rundown building, passed his secretary, and stepped in his office, and he locked the door, as he always did when he called her, and told her how lonely he had been. He brought her onto the yoga mat that he often used in the office for meditation. He kissed her and pulled down her pants and said, "Don't tell anyone, they'd get jealous." He was 45 and she was 13, and she was summoned for sexual encounters with him dozens of times over 4 years. Deborah Rojas said Mr. Chavez sexually abused her and another girl in the early 70s when they were in their 40s and they were teens. More and more people have come out and said this. Now, you're probably asking yourself, why now? Why now would Dolores Huerta, 95 years old, come out? Well, she's almost dead. This story's coming out. She might as well say something. Why are all these other people coming out now and saying Cesar Chavez was an abuser? He was a predator. Well, because Cesar Chavez was not just a man who championed workers' rights and farm rights and labor and left-wing causes in the United States. This comes as people on the right have begun using Cesar Chavez's words. You know what Cesar Chavez deeply opposed? Illegal immigration. That's right. Illegal immigration. Cesar Chavez was a left-wing union organizer who organized farms for immigrant labor in the country that was legal, and he opposed illegal immigration, wanted to crack down. And people on the right, including people in the Trump administration, have embraced that aspect of Cesar Chavez's legacy. Not Hugo Chavez, Cesar Chavez. They've embraced it. And so suddenly, all these years later, the story can now be told. He's become politically inconvenient for the left. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? A man who sexually groomed and abused young girls. It was Bill Clinton who gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Wonder if Monica Lewinsky attended the ceremony. It was in 1993. Cesar Chavez, his legacy can now be known in full that he was an abuser. His legacy can now be known in full that he used young women who were teenagers. His legacy can now be known in full that he raped his colleague. Once she said she was pressured. The second time it was against her will. She can finally say it. He's no longer useful to the political left. Isn't it amazing to watch the left turn on people they've decided are no longer useful to them? They for so long, they rely on these people's legacies. They rely on the stories they teach our kids. They name schools after these people. They name roads after these people. They put them on stamps. They build monuments to them. And all of us are supposed to treat them as left-wing saints. They are supposed to be saints, and we are supposed to revere them. And don't you cast aspersions on Cesar Chavez. He was a labor union leader leading freedom for workers in this country. But now, all these years later, he can be cast aside because it turned out he was opposed to illegal immigration. It turns out that Hispanic voters in this country who grew up being taught that he was a folk saint, they're moving to the right. And because Hispanics are moving to the right and Chavez opposed illegal immigration, it is now time to tell the truth that they covered up for so long. Cesar Chavez was not a great guy. He was on the left. He advocated expansive unionism in the United States. It is fun now to watch the left tear him down. Having been honored by President Joe Biden, put his bust behind him on the red desk behind the Resolute desk, on the credenza behind the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. Joe Biden wanted Cesar Chavez watching over him. Maybe he wanted tips on how to sniff the little kid's hair from Cesar Chavez's ghost. Now we know the truth, which many people knew it all along. They just didn't want to say anything. But now he's no longer convenient, so they can tell us the truth. Hello, my friends. I hope it's warmer where you are than where I am. Spring got a little schizophrenic and decided it was winter. Hopefully it's coming back. Okay, have y'all heard about this Lindy West woman? This is kind of wild to me. She's an author, and she's clearly living in a twisted, abusive relationship, and she's too dumb or traumatized to know it. It's like Stockholm Syndrome. Her husband, I forget his ethnicity. He's not white. She is. She's kind of this large, heavy-set woman, and he's convinced her that it is white supremacy for him to be monogamous, and he needs to have a girlfriend. And so now she's in this polyamorous relationship, and she thinks that it is a worthwhile thing to do, and she's trying to justify all the deviant behaviors he's made her do to degrade herself, and that it's all totally normal. And it is some wild, weird, psychopathic stuff. And as people are pointing out how, pathological the whole relationship is, this woman who apparently is famous in some circles is attacking them. You know what it actually reminds me of? It reminds me of the fat women who you were body shaming them if you said it was unhealthy to be fat. And they're like, no, it's not. And then Ozempic finally handed them some needles and they started losing weight. And they're like, oh, hey, turns out it was right. At some point, when this woman's husband, who she has allowed to basically do whatever he wants on her, decides finally to completely step out on her, maybe she'll see the light. It's a tragic, awful situation. But what's so crazy is the New York Times and others are platforming her is that this is some sort of normal stuff, that polyamorous relationships are somehow normal. No. Just crazy. The people on the left, I don't know. It really is a mental health issue out there. Now, you may be straining your mental health because of your computers. And I know who your computer therapist could be. Be Vision Computer. Call them at 404-COMPUTE or go to visioncomputers.com, and they can give you peace of mind. They can log in, remote in to fix your computers. I had to do it for a friend of mine yesterday on his Mac, and I have to tell you, I really wanted to sign up for Vision, but they do work on PCs. You can do printer support, email support. They can build you computers. They can build you laptops or desktops. They can save you money. And by the way, if they build you a laptop or desktop, their tech support comes with it. And they are wonderful people. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. Tell them I sent you. They might even save you some money. If you're a small business anywhere in the nation, you need to learn how to integrate AI to make your employees more efficient. Not to get rid of them, but to make them more efficient. Or you need IT support and you're paying an arm and a leg to rely on AI chatbots. You can talk to real human beings at Vision Computers. Call them at 404-COMPUTE. Go to visioncomputers.com. Tell them Eric sent you. They will keep your employees good at their jobs while Vision Computers is good at keeping their computers up and running. 404-COMPUTE or visioncomputers.com. Tell them Eric sent you. When we come back, an update on the intelligence briefings in Congress today.